I'm Garrett. 2 years ago, I clutched a crumpled $1 bill at a county tax auction and won a rotting 1872 log mansion, 152 years of termite holes, collapsed roof, and local ghost tales. Every cent of my late wife's $400K life insurance went plank by plank into fresh pine beams. The scent of new wood and morning coffee became my victory ritual. Then HOA Karen Constance screeched up in her pearl white Escalade, 3 police cruisers flashing behind her. She jabbed a manicured finger through tinted glass. "Officers, arrest this thief. That mansion is my son's ancestral inheritance." Diesel fumes choked the crisp autumn air as century-old oaks swayed overhead. Her basement-dwelling 29-year-old smirked from the passenger seat. I just raised my deed and smiled. Buried in that $1 paperwork was an ironclad 1872 federal land grant clause no HOA could touch. One call to the state archivist. Her forged documents crumbled. Cruisers left empty-handed. Justice served cold. Drop your city below. Ever battled HOA corruption? Let me back up and tell you how a grieving electrician from Minnesota ended up in a 2-year legal war with the HOA from hell. 3 years ago, my wife Diane lost her battle with cancer. The life insurance check, $400,000, felt like blood money burning a hole in my account. Diane always dreamed of restoring a historic home together. "Garrett," she'd whisper, tracing photos in architecture magazines, "imagine breathing life back into something beautiful." I was drowning in an empty house when that county tax auction website changed everything. There it was, 1872 cabin mansion, Millbrook Heights, Tennessee. The photos screamed disaster, rotting porch, shattered windows, vines strangling the foundation like nature's revenge. But underneath, I saw hand-hewn logs and crown molding that would have made Diane weep with joy. The auction listing read like a Gothic novel. Previous owner deceased, no heirs, abandoned 5 years. Locals whispered about ghosts and bad luck. When bidding opened at $1, I was the only lunatic brave enough to wave. $1 plus 15 grand in back taxes, boom. I owned 3,200 square feet of Civil War-era history. The smell ambushed me when I first opened that door. Decades of rot, mouse colonies, and something indefinable. Possibility, maybe. The wide plank floors groaned like old bones but held firm beneath layers of grime and neglect. Original door hardware hand-forged when Lincoln was president. Every creak told stories of 152 years. Diane's voice echoed in my memory. "It's perfect, honey." I liquidated my Minnesota life and moved south with tools, determination, and a contractor's eye for detail. 18 months of dawn to dusk labor followed. The rhythmic sound of hammers on authentic chestnut beams became my daily meditation. Sawdust mixed with morning coffee created my new routine. Every sunrise brought fresh hope as I watched light illuminate hand-restored pine trim, moments Diane would have treasured beyond measure. Millbrook Heights embraced me initially. Population 2,400, HOA governed since 1995, the kind of southern community where gossip travels faster than fiber optic internet. Murphy's Diner Breakfast Club adopted me like family. Neighbors shared homemade cookies and constant encouragement about finally taming the infamous haunted mansion. Tom Hutchins at the hardware store became my unofficial mentor, always ready with advice and fair prices. For 6 blissful months, everything felt perfect. Then Hurricane Constance made landfall. Picture a pearl-white Escalade materializing in my driveway like a luxury hearse delivering bad news. The driver's door opened with Germanic precision, releasing 52 years of weaponized suburban authority. Constance Pembridge emerged, blonde bob defying both gravity and logic, designer purse brandished like a medieval scepter, gardenia perfume dense enough to choke a bloodhound at 50 yards. "Mr. Winters?" Her smile could have convinced Satan himself to buy Florida timeshares. "I'm Constance, your HOA president. Welcome to our little slice of paradise." She toured my restoration with a real estate appraiser's calculating eyes, probing relentlessly about permits, documentation, and original ownership records. Son Bradley, 29 years of basement-dwelling disappointment made flesh, lurked in the passenger seat like a vulture, camera clicking through tinted windows with paparazzi intensity. "Such rich heritage surrounds us here," Constance purred, manicured talons scraping against my meticulously restored window trim. "Did you research the complete property history thoroughly? These charming old places sometimes harbor unexpected complications." I eagerly shared my auction triumph, proudly displayed clean title documents, mentioned how the county clerk had praised my thorough research. Constance's interest sharpened visibly, a predator detecting fresh weakness in unsuspecting prey. My family planted deep roots here back in the 1920s, she announced, clutching her purse with theatrical finality. Sometimes the past absolutely refuses to stay properly buried. Bradley's camera accelerated to machine gun tempo behind tinted glass. Here's what I didn't know. While I was lovingly restoring crown molding and hand-planing original hardwood floors, Constance was systematically researching ways to legally rob me blind. Her unemployed son needed money. She craved total control, and my beautiful restoration represented the perfect target for their schemes. I thought I'd found paradise. I was about to discover that some people view your dreams as their golden opportunities. The first shot across my bow came exactly 3 weeks after Constance's royal visit. I was replacing original window sashes when Tom Hutchins' pickup truck screeched into my driveway, gravel spraying like buckshot. His face was redder than a boiled crawfish. "Garrett, you need to see this." He thrust a manila envelope at me. Inside, official HOA letterhead, my name typed with bureaucratic precision, and a demand that made my blood pressure spike. Cease and desist all unpermitted construction activities. The letter claimed I was violating neighborhood architectural standards and conducting illegal modifications without proper HOA approval. Deadline, 48 hours to halt all work or face $500 daily fines. "What architectural standards?" I asked Tom, whose hardware store had supplied every historically accurate nail and board. "That's the million-dollar question," he muttered. HOA bylaws from 1995 never mentioned any architectural review process. My electrician brain kicked into troubleshooting mode. From years of dealing with code enforcement, I knew HOA rules had to be documented and applied equally, otherwise they meant nothing legally. If Constance couldn't prove consistent enforcement, her threats were just expensive paper. I marched to the next HOA board meeting armed with questions and documentation. The venue was Millbrook Methodist basement, fluorescent lights humming like angry wasps, folding chairs arranged in hostile rows, the lingering smell of last week's potluck casserole hanging in stale air. 5 board members sat behind a card table that had seen better decades. Constance presided like a small-town dictator, gavel in hand, her gardenia perfume battling the basement mustiness. "Mr. Winters, your project has generated numerous neighbor complaints." "What specific complaints?" I asked, pulling out my notebook. "Well, the noise levels. I work 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday as county ordinance allows. The architectural modifications, these are historically accurate restorations using period-appropriate materials." Constance's smile tightened like a wire under tension. "Mr. Winters, perhaps you don't understand how things work in established communities." That's when I dropped my research bomb. "I've reviewed every HOA document filed with the county since 1995. There's no architectural review process mentioned anywhere. I've also documented 23 unauthorized modifications by current residents, including your neighbor's unpermitted deck addition and another member's oversized fence." The room went church quiet except for the buzz of dying fluorescent bulbs and someone's uncomfortable chair squeak. Board member Janet Crow, Constance's bridge partner, cleared her throat. "Mr. Winters, those situations involve longtime community members who've established relationships, so the rules only apply to newcomers?" The temperature in that basement seemed to drop 10 degrees. Constance's eyes glittered with something dangerous. She reached for a folder thick as a phone book, and I knew she'd been planning this moment. "Actually, Mr. Winters, we've discovered some interesting information about your property's history. My family has ancestral connections to that land dating back generations." She produced aged-looking documents with ceremonial flair. "These papers suggest the Pembridge family has legitimate historical claims predating your purchase." I felt the room's energy shift like wind before a storm. Constance had just transformed from petty bureaucrat to grieving family member protecting sacred heritage. Brilliant manipulation that would have impressed a Vegas con artist. "I'd be happy to review any legitimate historical documentation," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart and the metallic taste of adrenaline. "Of course," she smiled sweetly. "We'll need time to authenticate everything properly. Meanwhile, all construction should pause out of respect for this delicate situation." The board voted 4-1-2, temporarily suspend Mr. Winters' construction pending historical review. Mrs. Oakley cast the lone dissenting vote, her weathered face tight with disapproval. I drove straight to the county courthouse, the sound of my truck's engine matching my determination. If Constance wanted to play historical claims, I'd verify every document with original sources. County Clerk Margaret Walsh had been tracking property records for 30 years. Her office smelled like old paper and fresh coffee, a combination I'd grown to love during my research phase. Mr. Winters, I remember your research clearly. Clean title, no liens, no outstanding claims. What about Pembridge family ownership? Margaret's fingers flew across her computer keyboard with practiced efficiency. Let's see. Pembridge, here it is. Brief ownership, 1923 to 1925. Lost the property in bank foreclosure during the Depression. So, no current legal claim? None whatsoever. And Mr. Winters? Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Mrs. Pembridge was here last month asking very specific questions about document authentication and aging techniques. The pieces clicked together like tumblers in a lock. Constance wasn't researching legitimate claims, she was learning how to forge them. I spent the afternoon photographing every relevant county record, then drove to the Tennessee State Archives in Nashville. The smell of preservation chemicals and old paper filled climate-controlled rooms where Tennessee's history slept in fireproof boxes. Original 1872 land grant documentation confirmed what I suspected. Johann Bachmann, German immigrant carpenter, was the sole original owner and builder. No Josiah Pembridge, no ancestral claims. Just good old-fashioned fraud in the making. That evening, I called my brother Cal in Minnesota. They're trying to steal it, Cal. Like Dad's farm? Exactly like Dad's farm. But this time, we fight back with facts. The sound of autumn wind rattling my restored windows felt like applause for the battle ahead. I'd learned something valuable from watching Dad lose everything to bank politics. Documentation beats manipulation every single time. Armed with courthouse evidence, I thought I'd checkmate Constance's scheme. I was about to learn that desperate people don't play by chess rules. They flip the board and scatter the pieces. The second wave hit during my morning coffee ritual on the wraparound porch. The crisp October air carried the scent of burning leaves and wood smoke from neighboring chimneys when Sheriff Deputy Marcus Webb pulled into my driveway. Behind him came a black sedan with government plates that made my stomach drop like a stone. Mr. Winters, I'm Deputy Webb. This is Agent Patricia Chen from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. We need to discuss some serious allegations concerning this property. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips, ceramic suddenly cold against my palm. The peaceful morning sounds, birds chirping, distant lawnmower humming, seemed to mock the gravity of their visit. What allegations? Agent Chen stepped forward, voice neutral as winter rain. We received a detailed report claiming you've been conducting illegal archaeological excavations and removing protected Native American artifacts from this property without required federal permits or tribal consultation. Archaeological excavations? The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. I've been restoring a house, not raiding ancient burial grounds or treasure hunting. From my electrician days, I remembered contractor horror stories about projects shut down for decades over single pottery shards or arrowheads. If someone could fabricate evidence of artifact theft, they'd bury me in federal red tape and environmental impact studies until I went completely bankrupt fighting bogus charges. Deputy Webb shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. Sir, we need to conduct a thorough inspection of your property and examine any historical items you may have discovered during construction activities. For 2 grueling hours, they combed through every room like crime scene investigators processing a murder. Their heavy boots echoed ominously on my lovingly refinished hardwood floors. Agent Chen's camera flashed constantly, click, 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 documenting my restoration masterpiece like evidence of historical destruction rather than preservation. The sound of drawers opening, boxes being moved, and equipment cases snapping shut filled my home with an atmosphere of violation. They photographed every piece of original hardware I'd painstakingly restored, every hand-forged nail I'd carefully preserved, treating my labor of love like potential evidence of criminal activity. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. Well, except the single Cherokee arrowhead I'd discovered during foundation excavation work, which I'd immediately reported to the Tennessee State Archaeological Commission per proper protocol, just like Dad taught me about following rules exactly to avoid giving authorities ammunition against you. This arrowhead. Agent Chen held up the small stone point with tweezers, examining it under a magnifying glass. Where exactly did you find it, and what was your immediate response? Northeast corner foundation dig, approximately 3 feet down in undisturbed soil. Stopped work immediately, called the state archaeologist within 2 hours, received written clearance to continue after proper documentation. Everything's been filed according to Tennessee and federal guidelines. Deputy Webb's shoulders relaxed as he reviewed my meticulously organized paperwork. Agent Chen, this man followed proper procedures perfectly. Look at this documentation trail. After they left, diesel exhaust mixing with my cold coffee and the lingering tension, Mrs. Oakley appeared from next door with fresh baked chocolate chip cookies and nuclear-level indignation radiating from her weathered face. Garrett, honey, that Pembridge woman's spreading lies faster than gossip at a church social during revival week. She settled beside me on the porch steps with a grunt. Yesterday at Kroger, she told the checkout girl you were running some kind of illegal antique smuggling ring through that restored cabin. My phone buzzed with incoming call. Rita Castellanos, the sharp property attorney I'd hired after Constance's first legal threat. Garrett, brace yourself for more bad news. Constance just filed a comprehensive lawsuit claiming adverse possession of your entire property. Here's where I learned something that would have saved my father's farm if he'd known it. Adverse possession requires continuous open occupation for 20 years in Tennessee, meaning someone has to physically live on the property and treat it like their own since 2003. But Constance's sworn affidavits claimed her family maintained seasonal occupation and property stewardship since the 1920s through regular maintenance visits and heritage preservation activities. The sheer audacity stole my breath completely. While archaeological agents were searching my house for non-existent artifacts, Constance had launched a parallel legal assault claiming her family never actually abandoned the property. There's more disturbing news, Rita continued. She's hired Pemberton and Associates, expensive Nashville law firm specializing in complex property disputes. Someone with very deep pockets is bankrolling this entire legal circus. That evening at Murphy's Diner, the usual Tuesday crowd went library quiet when I entered. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Eyes tracked my movement like I'd grown a second head or sprouted horns. Earl Murphy approached with obvious discomfort. Garrett, hate to say this, but folks are asking whether federal agents investigating means there's fire behind all this smoke. The meatloaf turned to sawdust in my mouth. Constance's strategy crystallized, overwhelmed me with multiple legal fronts while systematically poisoning community opinion. Even if every allegation proved false, the reputation damage might drive me away permanently. But she'd made one crucial mistake that my electrician training helped me recognize. When you're troubleshooting complex electrical problems, you don't chase individual symptoms. You find the main power source feeding the whole system. Time to stop playing defense and start investigating the puppet masters pulling Constance's strings. Rita's investigation into Constance's funding source revealed something that made my blood run cold. Garrett, sit down for this, Rita said during our emergency meeting at her Knoxville office. The smell of leather-bound law books and fresh coffee couldn't mask the tension radiating from her usually composed demeanor. Constance isn't just some vindictive HOA president. She's financially desperate. $400,000 in debt from failed real estate investments. She spread financial documents across her mahogany desk like evidence in a murder trial. Her house enters foreclosure proceedings in 60 days. But here's the bombshell. She's signed a development contract with Nashville-based Meridian Properties for a luxury subdivision project. The room seemed to tilt sideways. On my property? On your property. The contract promises her $2 million if she can deliver cleared land free of historical restrictions and current occupants. They want to demolish your cabin and build 47 luxury condos. Everything clicked together like a perfect electrical circuit finally completing. Constance wasn't just harassing me for sport, she was fighting for her financial survival. My restored cabin represented the difference between her bankruptcy and becoming a multimillionaire. There's more disturbing news, Rita continued, pulling out another thick file. Bradley's been promised $500,000 as a heritage consultant fee for establishing legitimate family claims. This isn't simple fraud anymore. It's organized criminal conspiracy across state lines. That afternoon, I drove home through a neighborhood that felt like enemy territory. The autumn leaves crunched under my tires with sounds like breaking bones. As I turned into my driveway, a white surveillance van sat parked across the street with tinted windows and no company markings. Inside my beautifully restored cabin, I found the landline answering machine blinking angrily with 23 messages. 23 separate attacks on my reputation and sanity. Mr. Winters, Channel 5, News, requesting comment on archaeological theft allegations. Garrett, this is Tom. Don't come to the store tomorrow. Constance organized a boycott threatening anyone who serves you. Mr. Winters, Tennessee Historical Commission. Irregularities in your artifact reporting require immediate investigation. Each message represented another front in Constance's psychological warfare campaign. The metallic taste of pure stress filled my mouth as I realized she'd weaponized the entire community against me. My phone rang. Mrs. Oakley's voice trembled with righteous fury. "Garrett, that woman showed up at my door with official-looking papers claiming you're under federal investigation for desecrating Cherokee burial grounds. She's telling everyone you're a grave robber destroying sacred sites." But then came the game-changing moment. Mrs. Oakley's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Honey, I recorded everything on my phone. That woman made some very interesting admissions about money and development plans when she thought I was buying her story." My heart rate spiked. "What kind of admissions?" "She told me once you're gone, the neighborhood will see significant improvements and increased property values from responsible development." She practically admitted this whole heritage claim is fake. There was my counterpunch. Mrs. Oakley had just handed me recorded evidence of Constance's true motives. The next morning brought Constance's masterstroke, a surprise visit with an entourage designed to overwhelm me completely. She knocked at 7 a.m. sharp, accompanied by a man in a $1,000 suit, a woman with an official-looking briefcase, and Bradley skulking behind them like hired muscle. The smell of Constance's gardenia perfume mixed with morning mist created an almost toxic combination. "Mr. Winters," Constance announced with theatrical formality, "meet James Meridian from Meridian Properties and Dr. Patricia Whitehorse, Cherokee Nation Cultural Preservation Specialist." James Meridian stepped forward with a predator's practice smile. "Mr. Winters, we understand you're facing serious legal difficulties. We'd like to offer a mutually beneficial solution." He handed me an envelope thick as a phone book. $750,000, cash, for immediate property transfer, clean sale, all legal problems disappear permanently. Dr. Whitehorse nodded with grave authority. "The Cherokee Nation is deeply concerned about potential desecration of ancestral sites. A respectful sale would honor our heritage while resolving your current difficulties." I felt the walls closing in from every direction. Legal pressure, community isolation, financial warfare, cultural guilt, and now a massive bribe. Constance had orchestrated a perfect storm designed to shatter my resistance completely. But she'd made one fatal error. By bringing the actual developers to my door with specific dollar amounts, she'd just provided concrete evidence of the criminal conspiracy Rita needed for federal charges. I looked at the envelope, then directly into Constance's expectant eyes. "I appreciate the offer, but I'll need to discuss this with my legal team and federal investigators." The color drained from her face like water from a broken dam. "Federal investigators?" Meridian's voice cracked slightly. "Oh, yes. The FBI takes interstate fraud conspiracies very seriously, especially when they involve forged historical documents and criminal harassment campaigns." As they hastily retreated, I noticed Bradley frantically deleting photos from his phone. The sound of their hurried footsteps on my porch felt like victory drums. Time to spring my own trap. Rita and I spent the next morning at the Tennessee State Archives in Nashville, hunting for the smoking gun that would end Constance's scheme permanently. The climate-controlled research room hummed quietly with preservation equipment, the air thick with the smell of old paper and chemical preservatives that reminded me of Diane's final hospital days. Sterile, but somehow hopeful. "There has to be something we're missing," Rita muttered, pulling another box of Davidson County land grants from 1870 to 1875. Her fingers moved through yellowed documents with surgical precision, each page crackling like autumn leaves. Constance is too confident for someone committing obvious fraud. Desperate people don't risk federal charges unless they think they have an unbeatable hand. I was photographing a routine property transfer from 1874 when my eyes caught something that made my pulse hammer against my temples. Handwritten notation in faded brown ink along the margin, barely visible after 150 years. Subject to Federal Preservation Covenant per Congressional Reconstruction Act 1872. "Rita." My voice came out as a strangled whisper. "Look at this." She leaned over my shoulder, her coffee breath mixing with the archive's musty atmosphere. The fluorescent lights above us buzzed like trapped insects as she studied the faded text. "Oh, sweet Jesus. Garrett, do you understand what this could mean?" I didn't, but the tremor in her voice and the way her hands shook slightly told me it was earth-shattering. She pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen with manic energy. "I'm calling Dr. Elizabeth Morrison at Vanderbilt Law School. She's the country's leading expert on 19th century federal land law and Reconstruction-era property rights." 20 minutes later, Dr. Morrison's voice crackled through speakerphone with barely contained academic excitement. Mr. Winters, if that notation is authentic, you may own one of the most legally protected properties in the entire Southeast. Federal preservation covenants from the Reconstruction era are incredibly rare and constitutionally unbreakable. What does that mean for someone like me who just wants to keep his house? I asked, my electrician's brain cutting through legal jargon to practical reality. It means your property enjoys the highest level of constitutional protection under Federal Commerce Clause authority. No local government, no state agency, and certainly no homeowners association can override federal restrictions. Any harassment of federally protected property automatically becomes a federal civil rights violation prosecutable by the Justice Department. Rita's eyes lit up like Las Vegas neon. Dr. Morrison, what about commercial development? Could someone legally build luxury condos on property with active federal preservation covenants? Absolutely. Categorically impossible. Federal preservation covenants specifically prohibit subdivision, commercial development, or any alteration of the property's essential historic character. The land must remain a single-family residence in perpetuity, protected by the full faith and credit of the United States Constitution. The room seemed to tilt sideways as the implications crashed over me like a dam bursting. Constance's entire criminal enterprise, the $2 million development contract with Meridian Properties, the 47 luxury condos, Bradley's $500,000 inheritance fantasy, all of it was legally impossible from the moment she signed that fraudulent agreement. There's even better news, Dr. Morrison continued, her voice practically glowing through the phone. Properties with federal preservation covenants qualify for substantial restoration tax credits under the National Historic Preservation Act. Mr. Winters, based on your investment level, you're probably eligible for up to $200,000 in credits you've never claimed. I sat down hard in the archive chair, the old metal frame groaning under sudden weight. Not only was my beloved cabin protected by the supreme law of the land, but the federal government actually owed me a fortune for preserving it properly. Rita was already planning our constitutional counterattack. Dr. Morrison, how quickly could we activate official federal recognition and protection status? With proper documentation and my personal advocacy, 48 hours maximum. I'll expedite the application through my contacts at the National Park Service Historic Preservation Office. After we hung up, Rita turned to me with a grin that could have illuminated the entire archive building. Garrett, do you realize what just happened? Constance has been committing federal felonies while trying to steal constitutionally protected property. She's not just wrong, she's spectacularly, criminally, historically wrong. The irony tasted sweeter than Diane's homemade apple pie. While Constance spent months researching document forgery techniques, she'd never bothered verifying whether the property already possessed legitimate federal protections. Her greed had blinded her to the constitutional restrictions that made her development dreams legally impossible. That evening, I sat on my wraparound porch with bourbon and the first genuine peace I'd felt since this nightmare began. The autumn air carried wood smoke and dying leaves, but also something else. The intoxicating scent of justice finally ripening after 150 years. My phone buzzed with Bradley's typical threat. Last chance, old man, take the money or face serious consequences. I texted back, see you at tomorrow's HOA meeting. I have some fascinating historical documents to share with everyone. The United States Constitution had just handed me a legal nuclear weapon, and I was about to detonate it in front of the entire neighborhood. The next 48 hours transformed my restored cabin into a war room that would have made Pentagon strategists jealous. Rita arrived Wednesday morning with 2 banker's boxes full of legal ammunition and a grim smile that meant serious business. Federal protection approved, she announced, dropping the boxes on my dining table with a satisfying thud that rattled my coffee cup. As of 6 a.m. this morning, your property is officially listed on the National Register of Historic Places with full constitutional protection. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the leather scent of legal briefs as we spread documents across every available surface. My restored dining room looked like a hurricane had hit a law library, but every piece of paper represented another nail in Constance's legal coffin. Emma Roswell from the Historical Society joined us around noon, bringing a folder thick as a small-town phone book and academic fury that could have powered the entire neighborhood. I've documented every historical inaccuracy in Constance's genealogy claims, Emma said, her precision evident in color-coded evidence tabs. The real Pembridge family owned a dry goods store in town from 1923 to 1925. They never lived on your property, never built anything, and lost their business during the Depression. Here's something I learned from Rita that every property owner should know. Federal historic designations create what lawyers call takings protection. Any government entity that tries to seize or significantly restrict federally protected property must provide just compensation at current market value. Even if Constance somehow won her fraudulent lawsuit, the federal government would be legally obligated to pay me fair market value for my $500,000 restoration. Jake Morrison, my inside source from the HOA board, arrived with intelligence that made my hands clench involuntarily. She's planning something massive for tonight's meeting, he warned, accepting coffee with trembling fingers. Constance hired a crowd management company to pack the auditorium with paid supporters from Nashville. She's also bringing professional videographers to live stream what she's calling the historic preservation versus property rights battle for America's soul. Rita leaned back in her chair, the old wood creaking ominously under pressure. Perfect. Let her bring cameras and crowds. Federal constitutional law is even more impressive with witnesses. Tom Hutchins showed up after closing his hardware store carrying a manila envelope and wearing the weathered expression of a man who'd witnessed enough small-town corruption. 47 residents signed statements supporting your property rights, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Most folks are tired of Constance's reign of terror, but they've been scared to speak up until now. My brother Cal drove down from Minnesota that afternoon, his pickup truck loaded with moral support and the kind of stubborn determination that runs in our family DNA. Dad lost the farm because he fought alone against bank politics, Cal said, gripping my shoulder with calloused carpenter's hands. You've got an army this time. We spent the evening rehearsing strategy like actors preparing for the performance of their lives. Rita would open with federal documentation, establishing unassailable constitutional authority. Emma would systematically demolish Constance's historical claims using archival evidence. I would deliver personal testimony connecting federal law to human impact and community protection. Remember, Rita cautioned, her attorney instincts sharp as surgical instruments, Constance will try to make this purely emotional. Poor local family versus big government overreach. We stick to facts, documentation, and 150 years of constitutional precedent. The dining room table vanished under layers of evidence. Original 1872 federal land grants, authenticated property records, enlarged photographs of Constance's forged documents, financial records exposing the development conspiracy, and sworn statements from neighbors documenting her systematic intimidation campaign. Emma organized historical photographs on professional poster boards, creating a visual timeline that obliterated Bradley's fabricated family connection. The real story is actually more inspiring, she explained, adjusting museum-quality displays. Johann Bachmann came to America with nothing but skill and determination, then built something beautiful that survived 152 years. That's the heritage worth preserving. Jake reviewed his secretly recorded HOA board meetings where Constance had made multiple incriminating statements about forcing me out through any means necessary. She's been planning this property theft for months, he said grimly. Ever since she discovered your restoration pushed the assessed value past $500,000. The smell of Chinese takeout filled the room as we worked past midnight, caffeinated determination replacing exhaustion. Rita coached me on federal legal terminology while Cal helped organize evidence into bulletproof presentation order. Every document reinforced the same irrefutable conclusion. Constitutional law demolishes local corruption. What if she brings expensive Nashville lawyers, I asked. Then we'll have more professional witnesses to her federal crimes, Rita replied with predatory satisfaction. Thursday morning brought Dr. Morrison's call confirming our legal position was absolutely bulletproof. Mr. Winters, your federal protection is constitutionally ironclad. Any attempt to force you from that property would require overturning 150 years of Supreme Court precedent. As we loaded evidence boxes into my truck, the autumn air carried burning leaves and approaching winter, but also something electric, the charged atmosphere before thunderstorms that clear the air permanently. Tonight, constitutional law would finally face down organized crime. Thursday night, 12 hours before the showdown, Constance launched her most desperate and dangerous gambit yet. I was reviewing federal documents one final time when my security system exploded with alarms. Motion sensors, perimeter alerts, and glass break detectors screamed simultaneously, creating a symphony of electronic panic that sent adrenaline shooting through my veins like lightning. Through my bedroom window, I saw 3 figures in dark clothing using professional lock-picking tools on my front door. The porch light illuminated their methodical work, This wasn't random vandalism, but calculated breaking and entering by people who knew exactly what they were doing. I grabbed my phone and hit the panic button Rita had insisted I install. Within 90 seconds, 2 sheriff's cruisers roared into my driveway, blue lights strobing across my restored cabin like a disco ball from hell. The intruders scattered like cockroaches when the first siren wailed, but my security cameras had captured everything in high-definition clarity. Deputy Webb reviewed the footage with grim satisfaction. "Professional job, Mr. Winters. These weren't random burglars, someone hired specialists." "To steal what?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Your federal documentation, most likely. Can't fight constitutional law if the evidence mysteriously disappears." But Constance's break-in attempt backfired spectacularly. The attempted burglary elevated our property dispute into federal territory. Interfering with federally protected historic sites triggers automatic FBI jurisdiction. Friday morning brought Agent Patricia Chen back to my property, but this time as an ally instead of an interrogator. "Mr. Winters, someone's escalated this situation beyond local crime. Attempted theft from a National Register property requires federal investigation." She studied the security footage with professional interest. "These men use techniques consistent with corporate espionage. Someone with serious resources is coordinating this operation." The smell of her coffee mixed with morning mist as we stood on my porch, surveying potential evidence. "Agent Chen, I believe Constance Pembridge and her development partners are behind this. We'll find out. Federal judges don't appreciate people who target constitutionally protected properties." Rita arrived an hour later with news that made my day complete. "Garrett, the attempted burglary just handed us the perfect legal weapon. Federal prosecutors are opening a criminal investigation into conspiracy to interfere with historic preservation." But Constance wasn't finished. Around noon, while I was organizing evidence for the evening meeting, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Mr. Winters?" The voice was professionally smooth, like expensive cologne over cheap threats. "This is Marcus Pemberton from Pemberton and Associates. I represent Mrs. Pembridge's interests." "What do you want?" "My client is prepared to make a final generous offer. $1 million cash for immediate property transfer. Consider this a last chance to resolve this situation amicably." The audacity was breathtaking. After attempting burglary, they were offering me money to surrender. Not interested. "Mr. Winters, my client has substantial resources and political connections. Things could become very unpleasant for someone fighting the established order." There it was, the direct threat I'd been expecting. "Are you threatening me, counselor?" "I'm simply explaining reality. Sometimes outsiders find small communities unwelcoming." I hung up and immediately called Rita. "They just escalated to direct threats." "Perfect. Keep that phone recording. Federal prosecutors love conspiracy evidence." That afternoon, the psychological warfare intensified. My mailbox was stuffed with flyers claiming I was a federal agent sent to seize private property. Anonymous phone calls every 20 minutes, cars driving slowly past my house, occupants taking photos. The most disturbing incident came around 4 p.m. I was loading evidence boxes into my truck when a white van pulled up across the street. The passenger door opened, and Bradley climbed out with something that made my blood freeze. A professional surveying transit, the kind used for property assessment. He set up the equipment directly in front of my house and began taking measurements, as if my property already belonged to him. The metallic clicking of the surveying instruments mixed with his occasional laughter created a soundtrack of pure malice. I called Sheriff Webb immediately. "Bradley's surveying my property like he already owns it. I'll send a unit, but surveying from public property isn't technically illegal. It's intimidation and trespassing preparation." When the deputy arrived, Bradley packed his equipment with exaggerated casualness. "Just doing some genealogy research, officer. This property has deep family significance." But Jake Morrison had been watching from his house across the street. He walked over with his phone extended, recording Bradley's activities. "Funny genealogy research, Brad. Looks more like planning how to subdivide the land for development." Bradley's face flushed red as autumn leaves. "Mind your own business, Jake. This is my business. I live here too, and I'm tired of your family's corruption." As evening approached, the tension reached fever pitch. News vans began arriving at the high school 2 hours before the meeting. Constance's paid supporters streamed in from Nashville, professional protesters with matching signs reading, "Protect Local Heritage," and "Stop Federal Overreach." Emma called with a final piece of intelligence that crystallized everything. "Garrett, I just confirmed something disturbing. Meridian Properties has already submitted preliminary development plans to the county for a 47-unit luxury subdivision. They're planning to break ground next month." The smell of diesel exhaust from news trucks mixed with autumn evening air as I drove toward the high school. In my rearview mirror, I could see the flashing lights of multiple police cars providing escort. Apparently, the sheriff had decided the situation required serious crowd control. My phone buzzed with a text from Cal. "Ready to make Dad proud, little brother?" As we pulled into the high school parking lot, I saw the battle lines clearly drawn. Constance's hired crowd occupied one side, waving signs and chanting slogans. My supporters, neighbors, friends, and constitutional law advocates gathered on the other side with quiet determination. Tonight, 150 years of federal law would face its ultimate test against organized crime and political corruption. The high school auditorium buzzed with tension thick enough to cut with a chainsaw when I walked in carrying boxes of federal evidence. 300 people packed seats designed for 200, creating a powder keg atmosphere that made my restored cabin feel like a peaceful sanctuary by comparison. The smell of nervous sweat mixed with industrial floor cleaner and the lingering cafeteria odor of institutional meatloaf from lunch. Constance had transformed herself into a grieving patriot for the occasion. Black dress, pearl necklace, American flag pin prominently displayed. She'd positioned herself at a table flanked by 3 expensive suits from Nashville and what looked like hired security. Professional cameras on tripods recorded everything for her planned social media campaign. I took my seat in the front row between Rita and Emma, feeling like David approaching Goliath's army. Behind me, I could hear my supporters, Mrs. Oakley, Tom Hutchins, Jake Morrison, and 47 neighbors who'd finally found courage to fight back. But Constance's masterstroke was bringing what she claimed were Cherokee Nation representatives to legitimize her heritage narrative. 2 people in traditional dress sat prominently in the second row, lending cultural authority to her claims. HOA Board President Janet Crow called the meeting to order with a gavel that sounded like gunshots in the tense silence. Tonight we address the property dispute between Mrs. Constance Pembridge and Mr. Garrett Winters regarding the historic cabin at 1247 Maple Street. Constance rose with theatrical dignity, approaching the microphone like an actress taking center stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we fight to preserve American property rights against federal government overreach." Her voice carried perfectly through the sound system, each word calculated for maximum emotional impact. My family has maintained continuous connection to that sacred land for 4 generations. We've preserved Cherokee heritage through respectful stewardship only to have our ancestral home stolen by an outsider using government bureaucracy. The hired crowd erupted in coordinated applause. Signs waved with military precision, "Protect family heritage and stop federal tyranny." Professional videographers captured every moment for what I realized was a planned propaganda campaign. Mr. Winters used federal red tape to steal property that rightfully belongs to my son Bradley, the last surviving heir of the original Cherokee-approved Pembridge settlement. That's when she played her nuclear card. One of the supposed Cherokee representatives stood up with grave solemnity. "I am Joseph Whitehorse, Cherokee Nation Cultural Preservation Officer. The Pembridge family has been faithful guardians of our ancestral sites for nearly a century." My heart sank as murmurs of respect rippled through the crowd. Constance had fabricated not just documents but entire cultural endorsements. But Rita was ready. She'd been documenting Constance's lies for months, and federal investigators had verified every detail. Rita stood with the quiet confidence of someone holding constitutional law as ammunition. "Mr. Whitehorse," Rita said, her attorney voice cutting through emotional manipulation like a laser. "Could you provide your Cherokee Nation credentials for verification?" The man's confidence flickered slightly. My credentials speak for themselves." Emma rose with a folder thick as a phone book. "Actually, I contacted the Cherokee Nation this afternoon. They have no cultural preservation officer named Joseph Whitehorse. This man is Marcus Williams, an actor from Nashville hired through Craigslist." The auditorium erupted like a volcano. Constance's supporters looked confused and betrayed. My neighbors began standing up, anger replacing intimidation. Even the professional videographers lowered their cameras, apparently realizing they'd been documenting fraud. But Constance wasn't finished. She pulled out her final desperate weapon, a thick manila envelope containing what she claimed were newly discovered federal documents proving Cherokee Nation grant of permanent custody to the Pembridge family in 1872. "These papers," she announced with trembling voice, "prove federal protection belongs to my family, not this outsider." The fake Cherokee representative nodded gravely. "These documents confirm ancestral authority predating any current federal designations." Rita smiled like a predator spotting wounded prey. She opened her briefcase and withdrew a single sheet of paper that made Constance's face drain white as winter snow. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rita announced, her voice carrying absolute authority, "I hold here an authenticated copy of the original 1872 federal land grant signed by President Ulysses S. Grant himself." She held the document high enough for everyone to see the official seal and presidential signature. This grant specifically designates the property as permanent preservation site for German immigrant heritage, protected in perpetuity under federal authority. The silence was deafening. You could hear people breathing, chairs creaking, and the distant sound of traffic outside. "Furthermore," Rita continued, "FBI investigation has confirmed that Mrs. Pembridge's documents are sophisticated forgeries created by Nashville document reproduction specialists. Federal agents are prepared to make arrests for interstate fraud conspiracy." That's when the real Cherokee Nation representative stood up. Dr. Sarah Mankiller, whom Emma had secretly contacted, approached the microphone with quiet dignity. "I am Dr. Sarah Mankiller, actual Cherokee Nation cultural liaison. We have no connection to the Pembridge family and condemn this exploitation of our heritage for personal gain." The hired crowd began filing out like air escaping from a punctured balloon. Professional videographers packed their equipment. Even Constance's expensive lawyers huddled together, clearly calculating how quickly they could distance themselves from obvious criminal fraud. But Constance made one final, fatal mistake. Instead of accepting defeat gracefully, she grabbed the microphone and screamed the truth that destroyed her completely. "This is my property. I've invested 2 years and $50,000 setting up this development deal. That cabin is worth millions in subdivision potential." The auditorium fell silent as her real motives finally escaped. No heritage preservation, no family tradition, no Cherokee connection, just pure greed and criminal conspiracy. Federal Agent Chen, who'd been waiting in the back, walked down the aisle with handcuffs ready. Federal Agent Chen's footsteps echoed through the dead-silent auditorium like countdown to Judgment Day. "Constance Pembridge," Agent Chen announced, her voice carrying absolute federal authority. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, interference with federal historic preservation, and civil rights violations under color of law." The metallic click of handcuffs snapping around Constance's wrists created the most satisfying sound I'd heard in 2 years. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled like a house of cards in a hurricane. "This is government tyranny!" Constance shrieked, her perfect composure finally shattered. "You can't arrest someone for protecting family heritage!" Agent Chen's response was professionally devastating. "Ma'am, you just confessed to criminal conspiracy in front of 300 witnesses and multiple recording devices." Bradley leaped up from his seat, panic replacing his usual smirk. "Mom, shut up. Don't say anything else." But Constance was beyond rational thought. The stress of months of criminal planning finally broke her psychological dam. "My son deserves that property. We've worked too hard to let some Minnesota nobody steal our future." "Ma'am," Agent Chen continued with clinical precision, "you have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you exercise that right." The fake Cherokee representative, Marcus Williams, was already being escorted out by local deputies, his traditional costume looking ridiculous as handcuffs glinted under auditorium lights. The smell of fear, sweat, and humiliation filled the air like smoke from a burning lie. Dr. Sarah Mankiller took the microphone with quiet dignity that contrasted sharply with Constance's meltdown. "The Cherokee Nation condemns this exploitation of our heritage for personal gain. Mr. Winters has shown more respect for historical truth than these criminals ever demonstrated." Mrs. Oakley stood up with righteous fury burning in her weathered eyes. "Constance Pembridge, you've terrorized this neighborhood for years, threatening businesses, intimidating families, stealing our HOA dues for personal expenses." Tom Hutchins rose next, his hardware store owner practicality cutting through emotional chaos. "I've got receipts showing she forced 3 local contractors out of business by threatening their permits. This woman's been running a protection racket." Jake Morrison pulled out his phone and played recordings of HOA board meetings where Constance had made incriminating statements, her voice clear as crystal through the auditorium speakers. "We need to make life so unpleasant for that outsider that he begs to sell cheap." The domino effect was unstoppable. Neighbor after neighbor stood up, sharing stories of intimidation, financial manipulation, and years of abuse under Constance's HOA dictatorship. The hired crowd from Nashville had completely disappeared, leaving only real residents who'd finally found courage to speak truth. Channel 5 news reporter Jennifer Martinez captured every moment as the community uprising unfolded. "This is unprecedented footage of grassroots democracy confronting organized corruption," she announced to her camera crew. Rita approached the microphone with federal documentation that ended the debate permanently. "Ladies and gentlemen, I hold President Grant's original signature designating this property as federally protected German immigrant heritage site. This designation supersedes all local authority and makes Mr. Winter's ownership constitutionally unassailable." She held up the authenticated federal seal for everyone to see. "Any attempt to force Mr. Winters from this property would require overturning 150 years of Supreme Court precedent." Emma Roswell followed with her historical society evidence, systematically destroying every lie Constance had constructed. The real Pembridge family owned a dry goods store from 1923 to 1925. They never lived on Mr. Winter's property, never built anything, and lost their business during the Depression. Every genealogy document Mrs. Pembridge presented was fabricated. The audience was witnessing something rare in American democracy: organized crime being destroyed by constitutional law and community courage. Constance made one final desperate attempt to salvage her scheme. "The federal government can't just steal private property. This is unconstitutional seizure." That's when I finally spoke, standing up with 2 years of suppressed anger and the Constitution of the United States, backing every word. "Mrs. Pembridge," I said, my electrician's voice carrying clearly through the auditorium, "nobody stole anything. I bought this property legally, restored it lovingly, and discovered it enjoys federal protection that's older than your great-grandmother." I turned to address the entire crowd, feeling my wife Diane's spirit guiding my words. "This cabin represents something beautiful. German immigrant craftsmanship preserved by American constitutional law. Johann Bachmann built it to last forever, and by God, it's going to—" The sustained applause lasted 3 full minutes. Real applause from real neighbors who'd watched constitutional law defeat organized crime. Agent Chen led Constance toward the exit in handcuffs, but the defeated woman couldn't resist one final toxic outburst. "You'll regret this. My Nashville lawyers will destroy all of you." Rita's response was the perfect mic drop moment. "Your Nashville lawyers just witnessed you confess to federal crimes on camera. I expect they'll be withdrawing from representation before morning." As Constance was escorted out, the auditorium erupted in celebration. Constitutional law had triumphed over corruption, and 300 witnesses had seen justice served hot and fresh. Federal protection, community support, and 150 years of American legal precedent had just demolished 2 years of criminal conspiracy. The good guys won. 7 months later, I'm sitting on my wraparound porch watching the sunrise paint my federally protected cabin in golden light, and I can honestly say justice tastes better than Diane's apple pie. The legal aftermath unfolded like dominoes falling in perfect sequence. Constance plea bargained to 8 years federal prison plus full restitution, $320,000 returned to the HOA fund she'd embezzled over her reign of terror. Bradley got 6 years for conspiracy and property damage, plus a lifetime ban from entering Millbrook Heights. The fake Cherokee actor received 2 years for fraud and cultural exploitation. Meridian Properties faced federal investigation for conspiracy to develop protected land, resulting in $2.3 million in fines and permanent prohibition from Tennessee historic districts. Their development dreams became legal nightmares that'll keep corporate lawyers busy for decades. But the real victory was watching our community heal from years of intimidation and corruption. Mrs. Oakley organized the first Constitutional Freedom Festival last month, celebrating how ordinary citizens defeated organized crime through legal courage. Over 800 people attended, including Dr. Sarah Mankiller from the Cherokee Nation, who blessed our community for choosing truth over exploitation. Tom Hutchins was elected new HOA president with a platform of complete financial transparency and equal enforcement. His first official act was displaying all HOA financial records online, updated monthly. "Sunlight," he announced, "is the best disinfectant for corruption." Jake Morrison became HOA treasurer, implementing oversight systems that would make Pentagon accountants proud. No more secret contracts, no more family member kickbacks, no more maintenance fees funding personal lifestyles. The federal tax credits exceeded even Rita's optimistic projections. $187,000 in restoration credits, retroactive to my original purchase, plus annual tax exemptions for maintaining a National Register property. The IRS essentially paid me to preserve history. My property value increased to $675,000 due to federal protection status and heritage tourism interest. The cabin now appears in Tennessee tourism guides as perfectly preserved example of 19th century German immigrant craftsmanship. Visitors from 3 states have toured the restoration, many inspired to pursue their own historic preservation projects. But the most meaningful transformation was personal. Processing grief through constitutional battle gave me purpose beyond restoration work. I've become Tennessee's unofficial consultant for families facing HOA corruption, helping 12 other homeowners defeat similar schemes using federal law and documentation strategies. The Diane Winters Historic Preservation Scholarship launched with a $75,000 endowment funded by legal settlements and community donations. Our first recipient, Emma Rodriguez, is studying traditional carpentry at East Tennessee State University. She spends weekends learning restoration techniques on my cabin, ensuring Johann Bachmann's craftsmanship knowledge survives another generation. Cal moved to Tennessee permanently, buying the house 2 streets over. "Haven't seen you this alive since before Diane got sick," he observed last Sunday over coffee and chocolate chip cookies Mrs. Oakley brought. "She'd be proud of what you built here." The smell of fresh wood stain from my latest project, restoring the original carriage house, mixed with spring morning coffee creates a sensory symphony that speaks of hope, healing, and home. Emma Roswell established the Millbrook Heritage Foundation using recovered HOA funds, documenting our community's real history while protecting other historic properties from development schemes. 3 neighboring houses have received federal designation based on our successful model. Federal Agent Chen visited last month to present an award recognizing my exemplary cooperation in exposing interstate fraud conspiracy. More importantly, she confirmed that our case created legal precedent protecting other historic property owners from HOA overreach nationwide. The community dinners on my wraparound porch have become monthly traditions. 40-plus neighbors gather for potluck meals, sharing stories and strengthening bonds that corruption once threatened to destroy. The sound of children's laughter echoing through 152-year-old rooms fills my heart with satisfaction Diane would have treasured. Rita framed the original federal land grant, now hanging prominently in my living room next to wedding photos of Diane and me. "Constitutional law," she says whenever visitors admire it, "beats corruption every single time." This morning's mail brought a letter from Oregon. "Mr. Winters, we heard about your victory over HOA corruption. Our historic farmhouse faces similar threats from county commissioners demanding we sell for commercial development. Could you help us research federal protections? I'm already planning the trip. Constitutional rights don't have state boundaries, and bullies exist everywhere. But so do federal laws protecting individual property rights, and so do communities willing to fight for justice when shown the way. Sometimes the best way to honor the past is to fight for the future. Sometimes standing up to corruption requires nothing more than reading the Constitution and refusing to back down. Sometimes $1 at a county auction buys more than property. It purchases the chance to preserve American dreams for generations yet to come. My advice? Document everything, research original property records, build coalitions with neighbors, and never underestimate the power of federal law protecting individual rights. If some HOA Karen tries to steal your American dream, remember this story and fight back with facts, community support, and constitutional authority. Share your HOA nightmare stories in the comments. You might inspire someone else to discover their property has hidden federal protections. And if this story gave you hope that justice still exists in America, smash that subscribe button for more underdog victories over organized corruption. The Constitution is still the supreme law of the land, and sometimes ordinary citizens have to remind criminals of that fact.